Hi, this is Kitty from Bashful Cat Cards. I'm here again with a card tutorial for you today. This was inspired by something I saw Jennifer McGuire do. She made a beautiful card with different stripes from different colored inks. I decided to try something a little bit different, and I ended up using different colored cardstock to get a similar look. I chose 3 colors I thought looked good together. This also works with 5 colors, and you'll see that later in the video. So I took each one of those colors and cut out pieces that were approximately 5 1/4 by 4, so just a little smaller than an A2 size card. Now I'm going to pull out my craft sheet and do some inking. I have a background stamp here with lots of little flowers on it that I wanted to use. You could probably use any background stamp. You could use smaller stamps too, but it's much quicker with the background stamp. As it turns out, it takes a little while to do the first card here, but the great thing is you're going to make parts for 2 more cards or even more. Replicating this is really quick and easy. So one takes a little while, but you'll end up with a whole bunch when you're done in a short amount of time. So I'm inking this up with white unicorn pigment ink. I'm getting it nice and inky. It's a lot easier to use background stamps if you place them face up on your work surface and then you put the paper on top of the stamp instead of the other way around. So I'm going to put my paper down here. It's also helpful for this design if you can kind of do all of these the same way, meaning that after this pink one I went and inked up the purple and the blue and tried to place the paper in approximately the same spot on the stamp. Not absolutely essential, and it'll depend a lot on the kind of design on your background stamp, but it will give a more cohesive look if you can keep them pretty close. So I just used some scratch paper there to keep my fingers from getting all inky. And now I'm going to pull up my piece of paper, and I have lots of little white flowers on there. The design's kind of light on the pink. It shows up a little better on the purple and blue, but it still looks nice. So this is just a pad of plain old regular cheap graph paper that I've had forever. I noticed everybody was having so much fun with those Simon Says Stamp big grid pads. Well, I don't have one, so I improvised. All I did was mark off every 5th square so that I could kind of get some nice even lines. And I'm just using that as a template to come up with lines. And this gray piece of paper here, that's just a piece of scrap paper that I'm going to use to make a template. I will then save that template and I will use it to make as many cards as I want. I actually played around with this quite a bit. This is not the first template I created, or even the 4th or 5th. Anyway, I encourage you to play around and see what works for you, because you may come up with something better. But after several tries, I decided that the design I liked best was to create 5 pieces and have them be close to the same size and evenly spaced apart. And it worked out pretty well. I liked this design better than any of the others I tried, so I'm probably going to keep this one for a while. So I went through and marked off all of my lines so that I would have a template, like I said. I'm then going to use this template to cut the pieces of paper that I've stamped with those flowers. So I pulled out my pink and purple and blue paper. They now all have the flowers stamped. They're all ready to go, all the same size. And I'm going to use my template to figure out where I want to cut my lines on those cards. There are several different ways you can do this. You don't even need to use a template. You could just use your ruler and mark them up there. I actually ended up using my guillotine cutter for most of these, and I found that was the easiest way. I didn't even have to make marks on the back. I could just use the template as a guide to figure out where to put the paper in the cutter. Whatever works. The whole idea is you just want to slice all 3 of those pieces exactly the same with different lines. So it's really important that all three of those pieces are cut exactly at the same place. It's not so important where the lines are, just that they're the same on all three. In fact, if you use a good guillotine cutter, I actually try to cut all three together, stacked on top of each other, so I know they'll be exactly the same. When I used 5, my cutter wasn't so happy, so I had to go another method. So I've made all of the little hash marks on there. I'm going to go through and draw lines so that I can see it a little bit more clearly before I cut it. You could cut these with a ruler and a razor blade or any number of other methods. Like I said, guillotine cutter worked for me, but any cutter you have would work. Now that I've got all the lines drawn out, I'm going to take my 3 pieces there together and I'm going to cut them out on the lines. I end up with 15 different colored pieces. I'm going to take these now and sort of just stage them for the cards. I'm going to put them together alternating colors. So I'll start with the pink and then the purple, then the blue, and so on, until what I end up with is enough little pieces to make 3 cards. Okay, that was it. That's the hardest part of the cards. Now we just need to get some embellishments and a sentiment and put them together. Next I'm going to work on the sentiments. I ended up, for these I used VersaFine Black Onyx ink, and I also covered them with a little clear embossing powder and heat set them. I learned this trick from a lot of other wonderful card makers who said that this gives you the best black impression. It seems to work better than black embossing powder. So I'll go ahead and put some powder on this, and then I'm going to take it off camera and heat set it and come up with a couple more sentiments. When that was all done, I cut them out. I've got 2 sentiments here, a thinking of you and a sending hugs. And I'm just going to go ahead and give them little fishtail ends on one side. I just use my scissors for this. It seems to work fine. There are other methods, but I'm just happy to get something pretty close. So I just made a slit in the center there, and I just cut from each corner to the slit, and it comes out pretty good. I did that for both sentiments, and now they were ready to go. We just need to assemble our card. So I've got the pieces for the first card. I'm going to take some good heavyweight white cardstock. This is standard A2 size card. I've already scored it. I used my ATG tape runner because it's the easiest and the cheapest and works well for me, but probably any kind of adhesive would work here. In fact, if you use something that's a little bit more forgiving to give you the opportunity to kind of play around with the pieces and get them just where you want them. I had to kind of take my time so that they ended up where I intended for them to go. But it's pretty easy. I made a more complicated version of the card that I'll show you shortly, but for this one, it's pretty easy. If you've cut these pieces so that they are exactly the same, meaning the blue, pink, and purple pieces are all the same, then they should fit together just like a puzzle. So it's just a matter of lining them up. When I set that first corner, you'll notice I left a little bit of a border because I knew that my pieces were a little bit smaller than the card background, and I wanted a border on it. You could do these the same size or cut the card out to match that, but I liked having a little bit of a border around it. It also gave me a little bit more room to play if I didn't have it quite right. Oops, that would be my other job interrupting. Sorry. I love making cards, but I got to do something to pay the bills. So I took the sentiment, and I decided I wanted to use some foam adhesive to give it some dimension. I like to make my own foam adhesive, which you may have seen on my blog or videos, but for this card, um, the Scotch roll is so easy and quick, so it was the right method for this. So now I'll show you what the card looks like when you do it in portrait mode. So this is the same size card, only this time it's a top folding card in portrait instead of landscape. I put the pieces on there, glued them all together, and got a little bit of a different look with the same pieces. So even a small change can make a big difference. I put the smaller sentiment on this one, also used some foam adhesive. And that will give us 2 cards. I will go back later and add some embellishments because they seem to need a little something, but otherwise they're pretty much ready to go. Now, I promised to show you some other versions, so I'm going to show you what the card looks like if you use a different color combination and you use 5 colors instead of 3. When I made this more colorful version, I decided I wanted a little space between each of these strips. This method is a fair bit more difficult than the previous one. I tried several different ways to figure out a shortcut, and I'm sure there is one, but I never did come up with it myself. When you just space these apart without doing anything else, then they look all wonky and it doesn't work. You need to shave a little bit off of each of these pieces to create the space between them. I did this here with my ruler and a very sharp blade. In fact, this is the second attempt after I changed the blade out, got smart. You could also do this with a cutter or whatever method works for you. I just eyeballed this and cut a little off of each edge. They're not perfect, things don't line up exactly right, but it was good enough for me. I think the finished product is not real. You're not going to notice the imperfections, I hope. But again, there is probably a much better or easier way to do this. You could always just put this together like the other cards and maybe put little strips of something over where the lines meet to give them a little bit of a break. I might experiment, and if I come up with something better, I'll have to do another video. But for this one, I just sliced a little bit off of all of the straight edges, and I'm going to put these again on a white card base, only this time I'm going to leave a little space between each of these. And again, I just eyeballed it. These aren't perfect, but it worked okay. For the sake of the video, I kind of rushed through this a little bit, but I would suggest taking your time when you glue these on. I just started in one corner and worked my way down, but you can get these a little bit more even and straight if you put down each of the corners and then you put down the middle piece and then you center the other pieces between them. It's going to look a little bit more straight and even when you're all done. So I started with the 1/4 there and a corner there. Now I'm going to go ahead with each of the other pieces and put them on just like I did for the other cards, only this time I'm just going to leave a little gap. And again, I just eyeballed this. There are better ways to make it straighter, but this was good enough for me. I went through and added the rest of the strips and got a very different look on this one than on the other cards. You can also use something other than white for the background. Another coordinating color works. And I did try some other versions, and I will probably try even more. There are lots of ways to change this up and make it more unique. So, one more card done. Like I said, they go together pretty quickly once you have them all stamped out, but the slicing up does take a little bit more effort if you want to make them like this. I have another sentiment ready to go, and I'm just going to put some foam adhesive on that one too and put that on. When that was done, all that was left to do was a little bit of embellishing. So for each of the cards, I added a couple little tiny die cuts or punchies to give it a little more interest. There's no limit to the kinds of things you could do to this. I started with a little heart because I always have lots of little die cut hearts all over the place. I put some Ranger Multi-Matte Medium on it to attach it to the sentiment. By the way, I love this new precision tip. My bottle's getting a little low there, which is why I was having trouble getting it out, but the tip works fantastic. This particular one is way better than the one I was using before. I'll have links to all of these in my YouTube description and also on my blog if you want to see exactly what products I was using. So I put that little heart on the sentiment, and then I pulled out some scraps and some punchies, and I added some flowers. Kind of messed around with this for a while, seeing which colors I liked. I stuck pretty much with flowers on all of my cards so far, but I do want to experiment with some different things. So I played around, came up with the colors that I liked, and attached the flowers with some more of that Ranger Multi-Medium Matte. I felt like they need a little more interest, so I added some enamel accents in white afterwards in order to give them little centers on the flowers. And then I also went back in a minute and you'll see I put some glossy accents on that red heart on the sentiment, so it kind of makes it stand out. And that's about it for these cards. I'm going to show you a few finished examples here after this. You'll see the landscape and the portrait versions and the more colorful version. And I also have one here in the pink, blue, and purple that's got the spaces between it so you can see the difference. There is also one in orange that I did where I actually left one of the strips off and stamped the sentiment directly on the card base. So that's yet another option, and it actually saves a little bit of time. And then last but not least, I'll show you a pink one that I did. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm easy to find. Be sure to check out my blog at bashfulcat.com. All of the products should be listed below and at my blog. And thanks so much for watching.